Chelik Chavches, volume 28, the Sicha for Rosh Chodesh Sivan. This Sicha will explain the two phases of the preparation for the receiving of the Torah and how they correspond to the two aspects of our ownership of the Torah. In the one hand, Hashem gives us the Torah, and in the other hand, that we do our part to have Kabbalah Satorah, the receiving of the Torah. As an introduction, so we can be better familiar with some of the concepts that will be mentioned in the Sicha. So the Torah describes exactly, play by play, how the Bnei Yisrael arrived at Mount Sinai, at Har Sinai, on the 1st of Sivan, that is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and then it says, Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Har. So while the Torah keeps on referring to the people as them or they arrived, here the Torah says, Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Har, that he, Israel, referring to the entire population of the Jewish people in singular form, camped opposite a mountain. So the sages tell us that this is no mistake. Rather, what the Torah is telling us, that when they camped opposite the mountain, it was like it was Ki'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad. It was like one man with one heart. And it's obvious, and it makes sense, that in order to reach such a point, in order to really to come to such a point, one obviously has to be very, very elevated, spiritually speaking, in order to come to such a point where all the differences and that typically bring to separation from one another, to discord even between one another, that all that should go away. There is no plurality, so to speak. There's just oneness. And of course, the sages tell us that this counters all the other stops that they had, all the other points of travel that they had until now, from when they left Egypt, and also post this, that there was always some kind of debate, disagreement, sometimes even discord. Another thing to be familiar with, we know the very first word of the Aseres HaDibros, of the Ten Commandments, is Anoichi. The sages tell us that the word Anoichi, which has 4 letters, can also serve as an acronym, Ano Nafshi Ksabes Yahavis, that Hashem says, I, so to speak, wrote in myself, my soul, my essence, and gave it to you. And finally, we know that the sages tell us, and actually in relation to this that we just said, that when a Jew studies Torah, when a Yid studies Torah, it's oisi atem loichim. Hashem says, so to speak, as if you're taking me. You're not taking something that's external to me. It's like you're getting the essence of Hashem. So let's get into the Sicha. So if you remember, at the Seder night, in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, when we say the Dayenus, everybody likes to sing it, but very little of us actually pay attention to what we're saying. One of the Dayenus is we say, Ilu Kervanu Lifnei Har Sinai. Had Hashem brought us close to Mount Sinai, Veloy Nasan Lanu Torah, and had not given us the Torah, Dayenu would have sufficed. Now, of course, this doesn't seem to make any sense. What purpose would there be in reaching Mount Sinai and not receiving Torah? Right? In other words, what has been accomplished? The answer is, of course, that when they reached Mount Sinai, as we pointed out in the introduction, they had such a great elevation. They were so spiritually elevated that they became, quote, like one man with one heart. This can only happen when one is in a very, very high spiritual point. When did this take place? On, quote, this day, as the Torah says, on this very day, which is the day of Rosh Chodesh, when they arrived at Mount Sinai. Now, the Gemara, the Talmud in Maseches Shabbos, in Tractate Shabbos, describes in detail, play by play, so to speak, what happened from when they arrived at Mount Sinai until and including when Hashem appeared on Mount Sinai on the 6th day of Sivan. So far we accounted for the first day of Sivan, and the sages tell us on the 2nd day of Sivan is when Moshe Rabbeinu came. Moshe came to the people and said, "Ve'atem tiyu li mamlechas kohanim v'goy kodesh," that he announced them in the name of Hashem as being a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. In other words, this is when we were designated as such. On the 3rd of Sivan, that's the next day, he commanded them, he shared with them the laws, the rules of boundary of Hagbala, which they were supposed to, where they're supposed to, which perimeter is going to be off limits, and so on and so forth. On the 4th of Sivan, he told them the mitzvah of prisha, of separation. They were supposed to be separated from one another and not engage in marital connection, so to speak, in order to remain in a pure state, so that they can be ready for the 3rd day from then, which is the 6th of Sivan. On the 5th of Sivan, the Talmud says, Moshe Rabbeinu built a mizbeach, he built the altar, and he offered on the korbanos, the offerings, in conjunction and connection with Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. Says, and then of course on the 6th day is when Hashem appeared. Says the Talmud that this accounts for the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th of Sivan. However, says the Talmud, on the 1st of Sivan, the very first day when they arrived there, Moshe Rabbeinu did not say anything to them. Lo amar lahu v'lo midi. He didn't say to him anything at all. Why? Says the Talmud, mishum chulsha de'urcha, because of the weariness or the weakness of the way of the journey. That means because they were weak from schlepping so many days, and they were all fatigued. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu waited with all the instructions one more day, and that's why he began the process of instructing them and preparing them for Matan Torah from the 2nd of Sivan. Now, on the face of it, l'chayra, it doesn't make sense. Usually, think about it. When a people are excited about something and they have a strong desire for something, the closer you get to it, the more excited you get. To such a point that you don't even feel any bodily fatigue. You don't feel any tiredness. On the contrary, your energy starts to build. You start to get more and more excited. It's almost like you have this adrenaline that drives you even more and more out of excitement. And as we know that when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they were so excited about it that they wanted the Torah so much that they started counting down the days. So how is it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu held back the preparations for Matan Torah, and think about it, theoretically, because of this, pushed off and delayed the giving of the Torah one more day, because they were supposed to do a certain amount of preparation, because they were quote-unquote tired, because they were weak, because they were weary from the way? Moreover, if you think about it, it actually doesn't make sense that they would be tired. Why? Number one, we know that traveling in the desert wasn't that difficult. It wasn't a chore. The clouds of glory flattened out the entire terrain. There were no hills, there were no ditches, there were no challenges in negotiating and maneuvering throughout the desert. They were almost like floating in the air. So there was no tiredness associated with it. Moreover, when was Rosh Chodesh Sivan? According to most accounts, the day that they arrived at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, was actually Sunday. Some say it was Monday. But either way, it was in such close proximity to Shabbos that they wouldn't have been tired, because obviously on Shabbos they didn't travel. So where does this tiredness come from? Where does this weariness come from? Says the Rebbe, the answer is that we need to really correctly and truly understand the words chulsha de'urcha, which, like we translated, literally means the weariness, the weakness of the way. However, it doesn't mean what it literally would mean, but rather it means a spiritual traveling, a spiritual traverse, meaning that they had a spiritual transcendence. When they left Mitzrayim and they were traveling towards Mount Sinai with all the stops they made along the way, which were physical, literal stops, but also they represent a gradual build-up, a gradual and elaborate build-up to their spiritual heights. In other words, they transcended spiritually, going from one level to another, but all in a gradual manner, one relative to the other. However, what happened on this day, the day that they arrived at Har Sinai, that they had this transcendence that was totally disproportionate. In other words, it was so high, it was so fantastic, it was disproportionate. And it was a total and fundamental transcendence. And this, perhaps, explains what, of course, now we can appreciate what the sages say. That when it says Vayichan Sham Yisrael, that he, Israel, rested there, camped there opposite the mountain, that they said it was like one man with one heart. And they add that all other stops, there was debate and disagreement. Of course, it doesn't mean that they just simply didn't get along and they were quarreling like little kids. That's not what it means. That they were fighting and arguing over regular mundane matters. Rather, what it means is as follows. You see, Hashem is the one who created us in such a manner, as the Talmud tells us, quote, that their minds are not equal. Their minds are not the same. We're not meant to think like each other. And therefore, we find that even in spiritual matters, there's always differences of opinion, to the extent that if you open the Talmud, you look in the Mishnah, you look at the Gemara, it's always full of machlekes, it's always full of various debates. And the sages tell us that they're not just debates that one side is right and one side is wrong. Both of them are right. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Both of them, as the Talmud says, are the words of the living God. That means, what do you see from here? That even from the prospect, even from the point of view of kedusha, of holiness, of true spirituality, not only is it okay, but there has to be, it's inherent that there is always varying opinion, that there is some kind of debate and disagreement. Not in a hateful manner, but there's a debate and disagreement. And here is the novelty of what happened when they came to Har Sinai. When they reached Har Sinai, they became so great, spiritually speaking. It was such a great elevation that it reached it to a point, such a spot, where there is total and absolute unity of minds. There was no whatsoever disagreement. Not even a disagreement of, quote, holiness. And this disproportionate elevation was, quote, the fatigue that they were experiencing. It was something that they were unused to. This was a great jump. This was a great leap. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say anything to them. Now, till this point, we explained very successfully that chulsha de urcha, the quote, weakness of the way, the awareness of the way, is a weakness, is a fatigue. However, the Rebbe is going to take it now to a deeper level, to a deeper meaning. You see, what is chulsha de urcha is not, so to speak, some kind of disadvantage of being less than, because fatigue and tiredness, weariness, is some kind of, it's all in the family of some kind of negative experience, that you're so overwhelmed that you become weak, you're not capable of hearing anything else. But rather, the Rebbe now will explain at a deeper level that chulsha de urcha indicates the contrary, a much higher, elevated level of spirituality that is so great that it's even greater than all the other days of preparation. That is the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth day of Sivan, leading up to Matan Torah. And here's how we're going to explain it. It's clear and obvious that there is a absolute disproportionate distance between Moshe Rabbeinu's level and the simplest of Jews. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest scholars, were disproportionately different, totally different levels, totally separate from one another. And yet, what happened on this first day of Sivan? That they all became as one man and one heart. It doesn't say all except for Moshe. That means the simplest of Jews that doesn't know anything, and the greatest Jew that ever existed, Moshe Rabbeinu, all became like one. They were all on the same level. And this is the main preparation for Matan Torah. Even more, so to speak, than the details that followed, the details as they were broken down into the second, third, fourth, and fifth day of Sivan. What does it mean? You see, we know that also before Matan Torah, even before Hashem formally delivered the Torah on Mount Sinai, throughout all generations, beginning already with Shem and Ever, the sons of Noach, there was always the study of Torah. As we know, the yeshiva of Shem and Ever, as it's brought down in the Medrash. Throughout even the most difficult and hardest time of oppression, during the enslavement in Egypt, again, there were those who sat and studied, namely the tribe of Levi and others, that studied Torah all the time. And if so, the question is, what exactly was accomplished? What exactly was the purpose of Matan Torah? The answer is that by Matan Torah, when Hashem formally gave the Torah on Har Sinai, it was given to us. It's Matan Torah. As we say in the blessing, Nosan Lanos Torah, He gave us a Torah. What does that mean? That up until that point, the human being, the person studying Torah, tried to take Torah, tried to get the Torah, but all from a human perspective, all, so to speak, within the limitations of the human capability, according to their own abilities, and therefore was limited. However, by Matan Torah, Hashem, quote, gave us Himself. As we said in the introduction, Anoichi. He starts with the word Anoichi, telling us, I am now going to give you my essence. Ano nafshi ksavis yahavis. And therefore, when a Yid learns Torah, oisiyatan loichim. You're not just learning Torah, you're not just learning something that is another component, another aspect of godliness. When you learn Torah, you're, so to speak, taking that God. You are connecting with Hashem Himself. And this is the novelty of what happened in Matan Torah, as we say in the liturgy, in the prayers of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Atoni Gleisa, you revealed yourself on Har Sinai. You revealed the you. You revealed such an essence of godliness that when a Yid gets Torah, it's disproportionate to what he would have been able to achieve on his own, or what was achieved in all those generations leading up to Matan Torah. And this is what's reflected in that first day when they arrived there. Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged ha'ar. You see, because it's beyond comprehension. It's beyond the rationale even and the logic of the spiritual approach to Torah. You see, because when there is a logical, rational understanding of things, there is a difference of the minds. And that's not by accident, that's the way Hashem designed it. And therefore, on the first day, because this was supposed to be the beginning of the preparation of Hashem giving them the Torah, Hashem made it so that they were like one person with one heart. They became such absolute unity, the meaning that they were all elevated to a level that's beyond any differences between one and another, because this was supposed to prepare them to receiving the Torah in a manner where Hashem gives Himself, and you become connected to Hashem. A good example for this is, on the level of comprehension, understanding, there's obviously a great difference, tremendous difference, between the scholar and the simpleton, between the one who understands what they're learning and one who doesn't. However, when it comes to catching the essence, getting connected to Hashem through Torah, there is absolutely no difference between the greatest scholar and his level of comprehension to the simplest Jew who's just saying words of Torah, doesn't even really understand the meaning of the plain, simple verses. Because the fact is, halachically speaking, and here's the proof for it, both of them require a blessing prior to their Torah study. And it's the same blessing, quote, that Hashem gave us the Torah. So basically, where does this come from? Where does this great aspect of Torah, that connection with Hashem, that we're able to connect to Hashem through the Torah, this comes from Hashem Himself. As we say in the blessing, V'nosan lanos teraseh. We don't have the ability to achieve this. Hashem gave it to us. It's a gift that Hashem gave to us. And this is exactly what Hashem accomplished through making them like one, to elevate them to such a high point that they all become like one. There's no difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and the simplest Jews. However, now the question becomes, wait, if they were on such a high spiritual point, if they are now able to receive the Torah from Hashem, or to accept the Torah as Hashem gives it to them on such a high level, then what's the point and for what purpose was the next 4 days of elaborate, detailed preparation? The answer is because the ultimate objective of Hashem giving us the Torah is that the person should become united with Torah. Meaning it's not enough that Hashem gives it to us, but it has to become part of us. In other words, we have to become part of it, and we have to own our part in the Torah. That through our effort and study in Torah, it becomes a part of us. That means it shouldn't just stay in a realm where Hashem gave it to us, but also it has to become that we receive it, that it's becoming part of us. And this is the ultimate unity with the Torah. that when you have both aspects, the aspects of Hashem giving us the Torah and the aspects of the person acquiring Torah. And these are the two types of preparation that happened. First was the first day, that Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad, like one man, one heart, an absolute, disproportionate elevation to holiness. It's one that they never experienced before, unprecedented, and perhaps you can say not ever repeated again. And that was a preparation for Hashem's giving of the Torah. And then the second aspect is that they started to deal in detail, making their elaborate preparation to receive the Torah, that it should become part of them. That was their effort, so to speak. That's their doing. And that corresponds to them and we, later, throughout all generations, making Torah part of us, making us part of the Torah, making it one with us. And now we can get a better appreciation, based on this meaning, of the deeper meaning of the words that Moshe did not speak to them anything on the first day because of chulsha de'urcha, because of the weakness of the way. In this case, chulsha will be translated not as a negative thing that is a weakness, a tiredness, a fatigueness, but rather chulsha as a virtue, that you made weak one's ego, the idea of bitul, the idea of chalishus, of the yeshus of the person, the idea of doing away, of weakening, of breaking away the arrogance that we typically normally have built in. And because of that, there you have the unity. When you don't have the personal self-arrogance, then you have absolute unity. After that, this was achieved, such a great level of bittul, now they were able to go through the stages, step by step, of the detailed, elaborate preparations for receiving the Torah and making it theirs.